The swing riots and a stabbing. My fifth great-grandfather, Robert Bobbins, was born in 1788 in Burnham Thorpe, Norfolk, to Robert Bobbins and Margaret Back. On the 22nd of March 1807, he married Mary Chesney in All Saints Church, Burnham Thorpe. In April 1808, they had their first child, a daughter named Susanna, and she was followed by Anne in 1810, James in 1816, Margaret in 1818, and William in 1821. My fourth great-grandmother, Amy, was born in 1822, and Mary in 1828. The swing riots were a widespread uprising in 1830 by agricultural workers in southern and eastern England, in protest at agricultural mechanisation and harsh working conditions. It began with the destruction of threshing machines in the Elm Valley area of East Kent in the summer of 1830, and by early December it had spread through the whole of southern England and East Anglia. At the county sessions on January 4, 1831, the court was presented with an incredible 172 cases, nearly all for machine breaking and rioting. My ancestor, Robert Bobbin, was one of these men and was involved in the riots in Burnham Thorpe. He said in court, "The men came to my house when I was in bed and said they had struck for wages. They made me go with them. They said they would not leave the premises without me." One witness named James High said he would not trust Bobbin on oath, as 5 years ago he heard him say he would hang his own father for a shilling. Robert Bobbin was found guilty. In 1841 we find Robert living in his own property. His wife Mary is living in the property next door with their daughter Anne, who by this time had married George Painter. In July of the same year we find Robert in trouble again, this time for stabbing his son-in-law George Painter. It appeared they had a quarrel in which Bobbin charged him with robbing him daily and hourly. For this, Painter struck him when the prisoner drew a knife and stabbed him. Tuck, the constable, spoke to seeing blood on Bobbin's face and seeing a wound on Painter's side. He took Bobbin's but found no knife. He had heard that Painter had levered Bobbin's before but never saw it. The jury found him guilty of common assault. He was imprisoned for 3 months with hard labour. George Painter had previously been charged in 1830 for damaging a threshing machine in the swing riots. In 1847, Edward Banham was found guilty of stealing a prayer book and other items from Robert. He was sentenced to 10 years transportation. He had previously been charged twice. In 1851, we find Robert living in the Docking Union workhouse. We soon find him back in trouble, as Robert is now age 60 and was charged by James Broughton for being drunk and disorderly and assaulting him. Robert was sentenced to 21 days in Walsingham Bridewell. In July 1854, Robert was charged for absconding from the Union House, with clothes belonging to the Guardians upon him. He was committed for 7 days. After a colourful life, my ancestor died in 1859 and was buried in Burnham Thorpe on the 13th of May. So rest in peace, Robert. You will be remembered. The headline read, "Lynn Fire Death, Danger of Smoking in Bed." So what happened to George Howard? George Samuel Howard was born in Kings Lynn, Norfolk in 1844, to William Howard and Sarah Lemon. The family lived in North End, which was the local fishing community, and by the age of 12 he was working as a fisher boy. In 1871 he married Maria Johnson at St Nicholas Chapel. By 1881 they already had 5 children: George, Mary Ann, Thomas, Alfred and William. And by the next census in 1891 they had 6 more children: Ada, James, Edward, Maud, Mabel and Martha. And by 1901 they had 2 more children, Charlotte and Edward. The family lived in Pilot Street and George worked as a fisherman. The 1911 census shows they had a total of 17 children, 13 still living and 4 had died. And by this time only 1 child was still living at home. Not long after this census, his wife Maria died, and George lived at home with his son Edward, and they both worked as fishermen. In 1928, George was living in North End Yard. On the 3rd of November, Edward was lying in bed, and he smelt something burning. On going downstairs, he saw the room full of smoke. Edward said, "I found my father on the floor next to the bed, half under the table. His shirt was alight. I smothered the flames with the bedclothes and opened the door. I then tore off his shirt and lifted him on the sofa, and sent for my sister and the doctor. The doctor ordered for my father's removal to the hospital." George was questioned in hospital. He said, "I was going to have a smoke, so I took a match from the box and struck it. The head came off and set my bedclothes alight. I tried to put the fire out but could not do it." This was all George could say. He died from shock the next day on the 4th of November, aged 82. So rest in peace, George. You will be remembered.